Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. My name is Samantha Meserve. I'm the director of the Renewable and Alternative Energy Division at the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources. We're really excited to be here today to talk to you about our upcoming energy storage grant program. Just a couple reminders and requests. Please keep your microphones muted until the Q&A portion of the webinar, which will be once we get through all of our slides. With that being said, if you have questions that are coming up during the webinar, please utilize the chat feature to drop those questions in. The webinar team and I will be keeping an eye on the chat and consolidating those questions to answer them once we get to the Q&A portion. And we also just wanted to let everyone know that we are recording this webinar and it will be posted onto DOER's website for reference at the completion of our time today. And with that, I think we can go ahead and get started. So again, I want to thank you all for being here today. We are talking about our program titled Advancing Massachusetts Power, or fondly referred to as AMP by the webinar team or by the grant team. And so why don't we go to the next slide? What we'll be covering today, we're going to do a bit of context setting and overview. We'll talk about DOER, some background information of how we got here today. We'll cover program information, including objective, rationale, budget, and key design elements. We'll then discuss each of our 3 proposed subprograms. We'll talk about some next steps, and then we'll move into a Q&A portion. So a little bit about DOER. So the Department of Energy Resources is the state energy office for Massachusetts. We sit in the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, and our charge is to provide a clean, resilient, equitable, and accessible energy future. We focus on transitioning our energy supply to lower emissions, to reduce and shaping energy demand, and improving our energy systems infrastructure. Okay, a little background information. So who we serve, I'm sure many of you here are familiar with DOER and have engaged with us at one point or another. We engage with a large variety of stakeholders. If there's anything related to energy going on in Massachusetts, you can almost guarantee that DOER has had a hand in it or is participating or keeping an eye on it. We focus on a variety of programs and policies to serve residents, businesses, communities, institutions, and everyone in Massachusetts to make sure that we have security, diversity, and cost-effective energy. And then some background information on the program. So back in 2024, DOER released a study and a report titled Charging Forward. This was at the direction of the Massachusetts legislature, and it was really looking at long duration energy storage and a variety of energy storage policies that could help Massachusetts meet our 2050 net zero mandates. And so coming out of that study was the recommendation for a grant program to support energy storage in the Commonwealth. We hired our grant team, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. And since then, we have been doing a variety of things to get us here today. We did a landscape assessment looking at other programs in other states, past Massachusetts energy storage grant programs, other programs serving technologies other than energy storage to identify what sort of structure would be most impactful to make our dollars be the most effective. We then launched a group of targeted stakeholder sessions. So we met with a variety of different stakeholders over a couple weeks to really help inform the straw proposal that we're going to be presenting to you today. So the purpose of this straw proposal is to give an overview of program design and specific components of the program. The focus of this presentation is on overall design, on targeted project types, and less on some of the requirements for program participation. Although, as you can see in our next steps, we are going to be soliciting public comment on this straw proposal, and we would really encourage you to provide not only comments on the straw proposal and what was included in here today, but also some of that more detailed information that we'll need to include as we start to build out all of the eligibility requirements and things like that. And I think we can move on to the next slide. So here we just wanted to define some key terms. So we know that across all of the different things that are going on related to energy storage, that these words can mean different things. And so we just wanted to do a little bit of grounding in our context to explain what we mean by resilience, community benefits, environmental justice, and low and moderate income benefits, and long duration energy storage. So you can see here how we've defined each one of those key terms. Great, and then this is really just a reference slide. I think DOER is really well known or infamous for our acronyms. And so we wanted to put this up top just so that everyone had a little bit of a key for when we're seeing acronyms throughout the slides that they can refer back to. And getting into some of the general information of the program. So the program itself had a total budget of $50 million. That included some administrative funds. And so the total program budget for project support is $47 million. Like I mentioned, we have a great grant team that's working on putting this together. That's including DOER, Incline, Cadmus, Camelot Energy Group, and Verdant. This group, it pulls together a really strong variety of expertise, both in policy development, program implementation, and technical energy storage knowledge. We are here today on July 1st with our webinar. We are opening up the public comment period following the webinar. We're going to be collecting comments over about the next 2 weeks. And then it's our hope that we'll have the program documents finalized sometime in Q3 with the goal of opening up applications for funding in Q4 of this year. And because we're not operating in a vacuum, we did want to just note a couple things. We know that there are some major challenges to energy storage right now, including supply chain issues, tariffs, federal tax changes, interconnection challenges, and this grant program will not be able to solve all of those problems, although we hope to be able to work with you all to help mitigate some of them. But just wanted to acknowledge that, we recognize that there are other things going on that are creating challenges for deploying energy storage across Massachusetts. Secondly, $47 million is a lot of money, but thinking about everything that we need to do in the Commonwealth to hit those 2050 net zero mandates, this program funding is pretty limited. And so we know that there are some areas that we may not be able to address specific barriers due to our limited budget, but we hope that the $47 million that we do have is significant enough to move the needle in a positive direction. And then lastly, we just wanted to clarify that this is a straw proposal. So we're not committing to anything in this presentation today. Everything is still open for discussion and is subject to change prior to us finalizing the program later this quarter and opening up for applications in Q4. Okay, and then moving on to some of the program information. We find it really helpful at DOER to identify some high-level objectives when we're designing such large programs like these. And so this is the objective that we've put together for AMP, to accelerate the equitable deployment of safe energy storage systems across the Commonwealth by prioritizing investments that deliver resilience, pollution reduction, economic opportunity, and health benefits to the Commonwealth, with a focus on frontline, low income, and disadvantaged communities. So as we go through the presentation today, I would really encourage everyone here to keep this objective in mind. And also as you're crafting any sort of feedback for DOER, coming back to this objective, I think is really valuable as you're crafting that feedback. And with that, I believe I am turning it over. I think I have one more slide, sorry. So we have, like I mentioned earlier, we have several proposed program concepts and rationale. And so these are the 3 key programs that we are proposing today that we'll be talking through. So community resilience to support the installation of small and medium-sized behind-the-meter systems that can provide power during an outage to critical facilities that serve a community or region. with an emphasis on resilience and community benefits. Safety and education. We know that the energy storage industry is rapidly changing as we continue to recognize technological advancements and move towards our 2050 net zero mandates. And so we want to support that. We want to provide targeted training to emergency personnel and first responders, provide regional, technical, and educational support, and advanced technology awareness to address storage safety concerns and move the industry forward. And then lastly, long duration energy storage commercialization. Again, we know that we're going to need long duration energy storage, which as we defined earlier is 10 plus hours of duration. And so we need to be able to deploy that. We haven't seen much of that in Massachusetts. And so if we're going to ramp up those offerings, we need to provide some initial funding that we can help support the implementation of these projects. So the goal here is to promote the development of non-lithium ion energy storage systems with a duration of 10 plus hours, with the goal of supporting and de-risking long duration energy storage technologies to expand reliable storage and safe operation of demonstrated use cases. I believe that was my final slide. And so with that, I will turn it over to the program team to walk us through the remainder of the slides. And then I'll be joining back at the end to help answer some questions. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Samantha. So I'm Jane Marsh. I'm part of the program team, and I'll just be walking through the proposed program budget breakdown by program concept and overall. So please note that DOER intends to target at least 40% of all grant funding to environmental justice communities or projects serving EJ populations. As Samantha mentioned earlier, the total program budget is $47 million. DOER expects to fund between 20 and 55 projects with this funding. The table on this slide shows the maximum grant per project and the estimated number of projects by subprogram. You'll notice the wavy lines that precede all of the values in this table, other than that total program budget. These are meant to emphasize that these are expected values only and are not by any means final. For the community resilience offering, DOER currently expects to fund between 10 and 30 projects with a maximum grant per project of around $2.5 million. For the safety and education offering, DOER expects to fund between 5 and 20 projects with a maximum grant amount between $400,000 and $800,000. And finally, for the LDES commercialization offering, DOER expects to fund 3 to 5 projects with an expected maximum grant per project of $5 million. Now I'll hand it over to my colleague, Allie Marshall, who will dive into more details on the proposed program design.
Thanks, Jane. So before we jump into the sub-programs, we just wanted to kind of level set and preview the design elements that we're considering for each of these programs and that you'll hear about today. So the first one is the target audience. You can think about that as who right now in this preliminary stage we're thinking about might want to apply for these grants or who we envision applying for them. The offering itself, which could be what could be the funding itself, technical assistance or in-kind support supported by the grant program. Project eligibility, those minimum requirements to receive a grant, the application evaluation criteria. These are the factors that we're looking at or expecting to look at for each application and reviewing which applications would get grant funding. And then finally, the project requirements. So those are the projects that do get through the application process and get grant funding, what's expected of them once they're granted the funding. So as both Samantha and Jane said, our great hope today is that you guys, listen to what we have to say and have a lot of questions and download the the formal feedback on the website. And so there's a couple places that I'm going to prompt you to think about specific questions we have. We welcome other feedback that you have, but specifically, we're really hoping for you to weigh in on, looking at the rough maximum grant levels that we have here in the estimated projects. Tell us if this is motivating to apply for each of the grant subprograms. And if not, why not, and what would be? Tell us feedback on the sub elements with each program, the target audience, the offering that you're going to hear about today, project requirements and eligibility, any questions you have or suggestions or concerns that you have. That's the kind of feedback we want here at this preliminary stage. And then finally, if there are areas that you're not hearing today, please let us know. And again, that will be a link at the end of the slide and on the website. Okay, so before we dive into any of the sub-programs, we wanted to first touch on some commonalities between the two project-based sub-programs. That's community resilience and the LDES commercialization sub-program. Both of these project-based programs they have an objective to promote storage development and operation. And both of these subprograms also have additional unique criteria that we'll go through later on in the presentation, but we just wanted to take a minute and talk about some of the common features in those program design elements that we're considering right now. So first, starting on the slide, project eligibility, both for community resilience and LDES commercialization, those two subprograms, we're looking for projects or thinking about projects that would have the project or load served physically located in Massachusetts, targeting non-single family residential facilities, and be grid connected. For the application evaluation criteria, again, this is aspects that we'll be looking at the application, not necessarily like a screening per se, but consideration for the application is the EJ or LMI benefits, community engagement and partnership structure, resilience capability, and then economic, technical, and project viability. And for the project requirements that are common, again, between community resilience and LDES commercialization, we're looking for projects that would achieve operation by December 31st, 2030, provide operational data for DOER for at least 3 years, have a community engagement plan that they're executing, and of course, projects would obtain, all required permits or authorizations and a safety plan. So now let's talk specifically about the community resilience subprogram. And we'll start off with the subprogram objectives. You'll see here that right now we're thinking potentially 2 options or 2 tracks within that community resilience subprogram. The first option is a pre-construction support. The objective there is to really focus and help EJ/LMI applicants identify and assess the feasibility of energy storage opportunities and better prepare to pursue that follow-on implementation. Option 2, the project support for installation. That's to support the installation of small and medium-sized behind-the-meter systems with the emphasis of resiliency and community benefits. So the target audience, you'll see a lot of similarities between the 2 options. Both of these are looking at communities or municipalities, community-based organizations, local governments, public universities or schools, and critical facilities. That could be community centers, hospitals, assisted living, wastewater. This is not an exhaustive list at all for either one of these, but we do want to give you a flavor of the kind of target audience that we're thinking about. And you'll see that developers are called out in partnership with other entities for that option 2 or project installation support. And I just want to double up on what Samantha was saying. Keep the questions coming in the chat. We're not going to stop and answer them right now, but we do want you to, write them in there so you don't forget. So on the offering itself for community resilience, option 1, pre-construction support. This would be a grant of up to 75% of the feasibility study, not to exceed 100,000, plus technical assistance for DOER and the admin team. And option 2, again, project installation support, a grant of up to 50% of project costs, not to exceed 2.5 million, plus technical support. You'll see the little asterisk that indicates that grant support could be more. Again, this is part of what we want some feedback on, and it could be more depending on the evaluation criteria scoring. So a few things to call out, again, that we're hoping to get feedback from you all on when you download that feedback form is, what kind of cost sharing arrangements do you think would be reasonable or feasible? And then are there innovative approaches to cost sharing that you want to make sure that the project team considers? Okay. And then project eligibility, For the pre-construction support, really, we want the feasibility study to examine all the eligibility requirements for the project installation support. For the project installation support, at this point, what we're thinking about is behind the meter systems that are sited at publicly owned or publicly serving facilities, have system sizes of 50 plus kW, are using commercial available energy storage technology, have resiliency or idling capability, and identification of critical loads and benefactors of resilience there. So for the application evaluation criteria, this is in addition to what we discussed earlier, that's common between the resilience and LDES commercialization. Both of these options are wanting to be looking at location in EJ or LMI communities and a letter of support. Again, these are things that we might be looking at and considering. For option 1, pre-construction support, we'll also look at identification of resiliency needs and services that would be provided. And then option 2, looking at resilience capability range and community impact, the system lifetime maintenance plan and dispatch operation plan, including the program and market revenue streams. And finally, their evidence of working with interconnection for the utility. So the project requirements for option 1, again, the pre-construction support, we're looking for what would be a site that would be designed to participate in the Clean Peak Standard Program, and then payment on feasibility study completion. And that's really how the grant funding would be allocated. And similar, but a little bit different, option 2, again, we're looking for projects that could be enrollment into programs. And then in milestones, we're particularly interested in getting your feedback on these milestones. The way that we're thinking about the milestones right now is that the grant would be allocated at different key milestones for these projects. And right now, what we have here is 4 milestones. First, an interconnection service agreement milestone, major equipment delivery milestone, mechanical completion, successful commissioning, and then final completion. And a couple prompts here that we're really hoping to get feedback on the side. Again, this will be in the document that you can download that's on the website, and a link at the end of the presentation here. You know, what's reasonable to expect around interconnection status when you apply? You know, how long does it take for a community resilience project to get interconnected? And what's reasonable to expect for these projects to participate in programs and markets while maintaining that 90% charge of advance, so they're ready for weather or potential outages. So for each of these subprograms, we have a couple example type projects just to get you thinking about what we might be considering here. So this is an example of the option 1, or pre-construction support. This would be could be a local government or muni building, could be an EJ community. It's a feasibility study. You know, the intent there is to find out if that building could be a storm shelter. That's the intent there for having such a system. And the project would take place before construction of an ES system. This next slide has 3 different examples of the project installation support. You'll see both the sites and the applicant is different from all 3. There's a school board where the middle school is engaged, a nonprofit where the YMCA is engaged, and a developer who's siting a project at a hospital. Slightly different locations, slightly different sizes, and initiations around why the project would be happening. And then they're all operational by the end of 2028. So again, the intent here, and I know that this deck will be made public, you know, you can go back and look at it just to give you an idea of the kind of variety of projects that they're thinking might come to fruition through this grant project. So next, the safety and education subprogram, a little bit different, as Samantha said, you know, really promoting the safety and education to go along and really move the needle across the Commonwealth. Those objectives for this safety and education subprogram is first to support first responders, planning boards, and others to take advantage of currently available energy storage safety programs. And then also support applicants to develop programs that might be filling the gaps in the current energy storage marketplace in terms of safety and equipment and education across the Commonwealth. The target audience that we're imagining might be interested in applying for funding for a safety and education subprogram includes state entities, planning commissions, fire departments or first responders, higher education or training institutes, regional emergency planning commissions, or professional organizations or nonprofits, community-based organizations, quite a wide variety. The offering itself is a grant of up to 80% of the total project cost, not to exceed $800,000, plus support from DOER, such as coordination or outreach, depending on what that offering is. So project eligibility is really that the safety and education applicant or an idea or program is unrelated to a specific energy project or site. And what we're looking for is really demonstrated broader applicability to the Commonwealth overall and the goals there. So preference for projects that have impacts beyond a specific town or site. The examples here is, either developing a training that could be offered to many or sending a number of first responders to a training to really expand the knowledge and accessibility across the Commonwealth. So the ideas around the application review criteria for the safety and education subprogram include the ability to advance energy storage safety, whether or not it can be repeated across the Commonwealth and shared. That's related to the level of the initiative, whether it's a community, other, or across the Commonwealth opportunity, and then what kind of benefits for the community and EJLMI benefits might be had through this granting process. So the project requirements will depend on what the grant itself is providing support for, but what we're thinking right now is some sort of scheduled reporting for DOER so that we understand what the grant is being used for and some key performance indicators to track that, whether it's the number of first responders that go to a training or the number of events that are hosted or materials produced. There's a couple examples of projects that could be happening for the safety and education subprogram. It could be a fire department in an EJ community where there's some training and trained staff get trained, and that's a one-time use, but expanding the staff knowledge. Could be regional planning council is coordinating quarterly trainings to make sure there's common approaches for permitting emerging response over a multiple year period, or a community-based organization that's really serving the surrounding communities for public education and online information around energy storage facilities to foster public trust and understanding of such storages. So the third subprogram right now that's being under consideration and development for this grant program is the LDIS commercialization subprogram. The objective here is to support near-term development and commercialization of that 10+ hour LDIS projects and really to de-risk that non-commercialized technologies and expand that reliable storage and safe operation to demonstrate more use cases. The target audience right now is LDIS technology developers and possibly critical facilities such, again, community centers, hospitals, wastewater facilities, assisted living. The offering right now is a grant of up to 50% of the total project cost, not to exceed $5 million, plus technical assistance. And again, just some prompt for questions that we're hoping for feedback on is, do you currently have LDIS projects in your pipeline? What's the scale and time frame, if you do, for those projects? And what size project for LDIS technology might be developed based on the implied grant value that we're proposing here of that $5 million not to exceed? Project eligibility for LDIS commercialization could be behind the meter, front of the meter, system size, anything 100 kW plus, non-lithium, non-pumped hydro ESS, 50% of that, round trip efficiency, 10+ hour duration on the nameplate capacity, and of course, site control. For the application evaluation criteria, again, this would be in addition to the common application evaluation criteria that we might be considering for both LDES and community resilience. We might be looking at the ability for a project to advance commercialization of LDES technology, the benefits to ratepayers and local community or customers, the potential to integrate with large-scale renewables, the ability to directly or indirectly displace fossil fuel or peaker plants, and a preference toward Massachusetts-based companies. Project requirements to be an agreement to be evaluated. And then similar to the community resilience program, milestones for funding to be released. Again, interconnection service, major equipment delivery, mechanical completion, successful commissioning, and final completion. And those prompts, again, that we're hoping to get feedback from you guys specifically, are these milestones appropriate? What's the reasonable to expect around interconnection status? And how long does it take for LDES projects to get interconnected? So a couple example projects. We have two here, one at a muni, one at developer at community hospital. Both of these are EJ communities. Again, there was a 40% focus on EJ and LMI communities for this program overall. A little bit of a different battery system and intention there. And then both of them are operational by the end of 2030 in these examples. And that is the overview. Again, please take a look at, we have more question prompts in the document online that we're really hoping to get feedback. And if there's any miscellaneous feedback that you want to give us, please give that too. We're going to really spend the next phase here collecting that feedback, tweaking what we're thinking about, and adjusting these programs. And so it's important for us to get that aired out. And I will turn it back to Samantha for next steps.
Great. Thank you so much, Allie. So as we mentioned previously, we are going to be opening a stakeholder comment period that will run through July 15th. Please send all of your stakeholder comments to Thomas Ferguson. He is our DOER's Energy Storage Programs Manager. And if you would like more information on the program, the link to our program website is included here. Jacqueline from DOER, who is our Energy Storage Fellow, also dropped that link into the chat as well. And so with that, I think we can go ahead and move on to questions. So we have a great list of questions that we have been receiving throughout the presentation. So we'll go ahead and start running through some of those. And then if people would like to ask verbal questions, please use the raise hand feature and we'll call on you individually to ask those questions as well. And so one of the first questions we received is there a minimum load requirement for a grant? We have some rough, I think, requirements that we're proposing. So 50 kilowatts for resilience, 100 kilowatts for long duration energy storage, but would likely score higher for projects that serve a greater population. We do want to clarify that we are not intending to support single family residential systems, although we would be looking to support multifamily and larger projects. Our next question is the expectation that these funds would be awarded following a single solicitation, or will funds be dispersed across multiple solicitations before 2030? It's our expectation that we'll be doing a single solicitation, obviously depending on the number of proposals we get. If we have budget left over, we'll kind of continue that solicitation over a longer period of time. But it's our guess that we'll likely receive enough proposals to allocate the entire program budget through one solicitation. Okay, just moving through some of our questions. I will also note that if we don't answer your question that was put into the chat, it's likely either because you provided feedback, which we are dutifully noting, or we don't have an answer to your question. which then I would encourage you to include that as part of your stakeholder comments. We are really looking forward to seeing all of the questions and feedback coming from this group and others that are participating as well. So if we're not answering your question, it's not that we're ignoring you. It's likely that we don't have an answer, and would love to hear more from you about what your recommendation would be in regards to that question. I think the most valuable stakeholder feedback we can receive is, are you planning to do this? Here would be my recommendation as to why you should do that, and give us your preference. Okay. One of the next questions was, how could storage at an electrical substation fit into this program or not? The community resilience offering is proposing to target behind the meter facilities. We're open to stakeholder comments on how storage interconnected front of the meter into electrical substations could promote the goals of the community resilience program, or also under the long duration energy storage offering. But we are currently proposing mostly behind the meter projects under the community resilience offering. We've gotten a variety of questions just around cost share and cost share requirements and different ways that cost share could be met. We would really love feedback on the cost share proposals that we've put into the presentation today. So whether or not they're adequate, if they're too high, or if there are innovative ways that cost shares could be met, such as with staff time, other grants or funding opportunities, et cetera. We don't want to inadvertently exclude any entities from being able to participate in this program because the cost share requirements that we've set are infeasible. So we don't have detailed answers to those questions, but would really value feedback on those. The next question we see is, does DOER already have a curriculum in mind for these safety trainings? We do not. We know that safety and education is a really critical topic for energy storage. We think that there is probably a wide variety of different opportunities within that category, but we're really looking for applicants to identify what their recommended curriculum would be. So for example, a proposal that includes, we want to provide fire safety training for municipal first responders. Here's what that curriculum would include. Here's how many people it would serve across how many communities, et cetera. Those will be some of the things that we'll be evaluating as we're scoring proposals. Can the community resilience funding be used to support community engagement activities? We had originally envisioned the community resilience program to target specific resiliency-focused energy storage projects. However, I think some community engagement activities could potentially fall under the safety and education offering. And so, again, we're welcoming a variety of proposals under that offering, or would welcome feedback on how to make it explicit on what types of offerings should be available under community resilience compared to the safety and education offering. We received another question about utility scale battery energy storage systems, for example, 100 megawatt, 400 megawatt hour, whether or not they would be able to apply for this grant, as it seems the limits are based on community or commercial scale. Is there a way to include these? We would love to include all energy storage technologies, but I think the reality is that $47 million, while it's nothing to turn our noses up at, it is a relatively small budget given the number of projects that we're hoping to support and how expensive those projects are. And so, given that we're not intending to address utility scale short duration energy storage systems, in particular, given some of our other DOER policies that are currently ongoing, such as the 83E energy storage procurement and the Clean Peak Energy Standard, et cetera. The next question is, can other storage technologies be proposed, such as thermal storage coupled with heat pumps, that may be much more affordable than batteries and potentially more effective? Yeah, we're really open to a variety of different energy storage types. The funding is meant to target energy storage systems. We haven't explicitly said that it needs to be a lithium ion battery. In fact, in our long duration energy storage offering, I think we're looking for alternatives to lithium ion. So we're really open to what those could include. I would just recommend submitting some stakeholder comments about what types of technologies you would encourage us to include. And also, if you have any ideas around eligibility criteria and how DOER could build out the scoring of those projects, that's always immensely helpful. Under our next question, we have under resilience, given requirements for existing technologies, will they likely be lithium ion technologies? And if so, will there be any performance or safety requirements? Yes, so DOER is seeking commercially available technologies that meet required code and safety standards. In our eligibility criteria, what will be required to be submitted as part of the application will include a variety of information related to safety, community support, siting, permitting, etc. For the long duration energy storage subgroup, will there be a minimum technology readiness level at the time the application is submitted in order to be eligible to receive the grant? We are looking to target demonstration projects or commercial deployments of long duration energy storage, but we welcome feedback on this. The long duration energy storage, it's a tough nut to crack, right? We haven't historically seen any, if many, of these projects move forward. And so we recognize that this funding will be a little bit different than our traditional, lithium ion community resilience offering. And so, we're open to proposals and would just encourage proposals to include what is the value of that proposal, right? So if it's a demonstration project that maybe, has some uncertainty around whether or not it would be deployable on a larger scale or have some sort of uncertainties, we're going to really be looking at the applications to understand what is the value of that project given the DOER funding that would be provided. And so if there's a very strong, compelling case for a project that could utilize some of these demonstration funds to then be able to become more commercially available, to then be able to scale, I think we're really interested in those types of projects. Was there a consideration for the community resilience program design to be awarded as an adder on a dollar per kilowatt basis to specifically only account for the premium necessary for the resiliency component? This would enable a great number of projects to pencil by leveraging other components of the value stack to drive down the energy storage system cost in lieu of incentivizing a greater percentage of the project and only awarding a finite number of projects. We welcome stakeholder feedback on this. We recognize that there are a variety of different entity types that are likely going to be seeking this funding. There might be some for-profit entities that are able to partner with a developer to access a variety of other funding streams, but we also want to keep the door open, in particular for nonprofits, for community entities, for municipalities, particularly environmental justice communities, to be able to access this funding. And in those cases, they might need a larger incentive in order for the project to become a reality. So we welcome feedback on that and stakeholder comments, but we are trying to acknowledge that there are sometimes with program design structures that inherently prevent specific types of projects from moving forward, and we don't want our cost share structure or our incentive structure to be a barrier. And when would the straw proposal go into place? So we're hoping to incorporate stakeholder feedback following the public comment period on July 15th to finalize everything by the end of Q3 and open up applications sometime in Q4, so later this year. Okay. And with that, I think those are the majority of our written questions. And so I don't see any hands raised for any additional questions. And so I'll maybe give it another minute. But ultimately just want to really appreciate everyone's participation here Again, we really could not develop these programs without strong stakeholder support. And we really value the time and effort that everyone puts into attending these webinars, putting together stakeholder comments. It's immensely valuable to the work that we do. And we are really appreciative of everyone that has participated. And so I think with that, we don't have any other questions or anything. I think we can go ahead and wrap it up. Oh, it looks like one more question came in. Can the same entity submit multiple applications for two separate projects? Yes, we don't currently have a restriction on the number of applications that an individual entity could submit. Just recognizing that you will, to some degree, be competing against yourself. But we don't have any restrictions on awarding funding to an entity for two different projects. However, we are going to be looking at the distribution of projects across the Commonwealth, across different ownership types and things like that. So if you're submitting two projects that are relatively the same demographic, we might take that into consideration, but we would encourage you to submit those proposals. The next, it looks like we have another question about public entities may not be able to or may not want to purchase, own, and maintain an energy storage system. Would a city be able to provide for a community resilience grant if the battery were to be owned by a third party with benefits flowing to the city? I would recommend providing some stakeholder feedback on that. I think our desire is to have communities and entities owning the systems themselves, just because we know that does typically maximize the value flowing to the entity, but definitely recognize that there are some bandwidth constrained entities out there that could benefit from shared ownership models. We would really need to see in the application the value stack, and how our grant dollars are supporting the value flowing to the entity itself. We did get a comment about whether or not the comment period can be extended. We are trying to move quickly on this, so I will say we do have a July 15th deadline, but if if an individual does need an extension, please reach out to DOER directly. We can work with individuals, but our preference is to receive all feedback by July 15th. Okay. Any final questions or hands anyone would like to? Okay, great. Well, I think we can wrap up there. If anyone does have any additional questions that come to mind, please feel free to reach out. I do want to extend a big heartfelt thank you to our program team who really helped make this webinar happen, and also the DOER team, Tom and Jacqueline, who are on the line, who have been wonderful in supporting this work. We're really excited about this opportunity. So we look forward to reading all of your stakeholder feedback and working with all of you as we aim to get this opportunity out the door and available to everyone in the Commonwealth. So thank you so much, and have a great 4th of July weekend, everyone. Yes, the webinar recording will be available online. It'll be available on DOER's website. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.